The celestial spire had always been a place of light and power. Its crystal towers reached so high they seemed to touch the stars themselves. Diplomats and traders from 100 different worlds walked its corridors every day, making deals, signing treaties, celebrating the peace that Empress Caldraxis had maintained for over 1,000 years. But not anymore. 443 cycles, what humans would call about 6 weeks, the palace had fallen into an eerie quiet. The grand halls that once echoed with a dozen different languages now held only whispers. Servants moved like ghosts through the corridors, careful not to make any sound that might disturb the sealed throne room at the palace's heart. Inside that throne room sat Empress Caldraxis the Eternal, last of the ancient dragon lords who had unified 17 star systems under one banner of peace. She hadn't moved from her crystalline throne in all those 43 cycles. She hadn't eaten. Hadn't slept. Hadn't spoken a single word to anyone. Her mate was dead. Consort Vethrian had fallen defending a small colony world on the Empire's edge. The Void Reapers had come without warning, those terrible creatures from the dark spaces between stars. Vethrian had held them off alone for 3 hours while civilian transports evacuated millions of families. He'd saved every single one of them. But he hadn't saved himself. The news had reached Caldraxis during a routine council meeting. She'd simply stood up, walked to her throne room, and sealed the doors behind her. That was 43 cycles ago. Now the palace staff lived in fear. Not of what the Empress might do, but of what she might become. Her advisors had tried approaching the sealed doors in those first few days. Each time, they'd felt waves of raw power radiating from within, the psychic equivalent of standing next to a star about to explode. Ancient, terrible power that had no direction, no purpose, just pure grief threatening to tear reality apart. After the fifth advisor collapsed from the pressure, they stopped trying. The Empire's generals held emergency meetings, discussing what would happen if their Empress never emerged. Who would lead? How would they maintain order across 17 systems? Some whispered that perhaps it was time for new leadership, that an Empress who could be broken by grief was no Empress at all. But most just waited and worried. Meanwhile, on the palace's lower levels, life continued in small, ordinary ways. Someone still had to clean the floors. Someone still had to maintain the observation decks where tourists used to gather. Someone still had to make sure the lights stayed on. That someone, on the night shift, was a human named Tyler Brooks. Tyler had arrived on the capital world 2 years earlier, part of Earth's first wave of workers after humanity made contact with the greater galactic community. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist or anyone important. He was just a janitor who'd signed up for an off-world work contract because Earth had gotten too expensive and he needed a fresh start somewhere far away. He was 32 years old, spoke only English and a bit of broken galactic common, and mostly kept to himself. His shift ran from midnight to 8 in the morning, local time. He cleaned the Western observation galleries, the diplomatic waiting rooms, and sometimes the grand corridor that led to the restricted areas where he wasn't technically supposed to go. Tyler was good at his job. He showed up on time, did his work thoroughly, and never complained. He liked the night shift because it meant fewer people around. Fewer conversations. Fewer moments when someone might ask him how he was doing and he'd have to pretend everything was fine. On this particular night, Tyler's supervisor had given him a new route. One of the other janitors had quit suddenly, too scared to work in a palace where a grieving dragon goddess might explode at any moment, and someone had to cover his areas. That route included the Forbidden Corridor. Tyler had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. The other human workers talked about it in the break room, voices low and nervous. They said the Empress was going mad with grief. That she might destroy the entire planet. That anyone who got too close to her throne room never came back the same. But Tyler needed this job. The contract paid well and came with housing. He'd left Earth with almost nothing, running from memories that hurt too much to face. He couldn't afford to lose this position over superstition. So when his cleaning cart reached the corridor outside the throne room, Tyler didn't turn back. He just started mopping, same as he would anywhere else. The corridor was beautiful, he had to admit. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that caught light and bent it into colors that didn't exist on Earth. The floor was polished marble, veined with gold. Even the air felt different here, heavier, charged with something he couldn't quite name. The throne room doors towered 3 stories high, made of dark metal carved with scenes of dragons and stars. They were sealed tight, and yeah, Tyler could feel something coming from behind them. A pressure. A weight. Like standing outside during a thunderstorm, that moment before lightning strikes when the hair on your arm stands up. But he'd felt worse. As Tyler mopped closer to the doors, his light caught something on the floor. A small pool of liquid seeping out from beneath the sealed entrance. He knelt down, curious. It wasn't water. It was thicker, and it caught the light strangely, swirling with colors like oil on pavement but more vibrant. More alive. Tears, he realized. Dragon tears, crystallizing as they hit the air. Tyler sat back on his heels, staring at that small pool of otherworldly grief. For a moment, he forgot about the danger, forgot about the warnings. He just saw what it was, evidence that someone, even someone as powerful as a dragon empress, was crying alone in the dark. He knew that feeling. Without really thinking about it, Tyler pulled out a clean cloth from his cart and carefully wiped up the tears, treating them as gently as he would treat anything precious and broken. He didn't try to open the doors. Didn't call for anyone. Just cleaned up the evidence of pain, then sat down with his back against the wall beside the entrance. It was time for his break anyway. Inside the throne room, Caldraxis felt the small presence outside her doors. Such a tiny spark of life compared to the blazing souls of her generals and advisors. But this one was different. It didn't pulse with fear. Didn't radiate expectation or judgment. It just existed, quiet and small and surprisingly peaceful. For the first time in 43 cycles, Caldraxis found herself curious about something other than her own grief. Tyler came back the next night. And the night after that. It wasn't a grand gesture or some carefully planned strategy. He simply had work to do in that corridor, and when his break time came around, he sat in the same spot against the wall beside those massive doors. It was quiet there. Peaceful, in a strange way. And after 2 years of avoiding quiet because quiet meant thinking about things he didn't want to think about, Tyler found he didn't mind it so much anymore. On the third night, he brought his portable speaker. It was a cheap thing he'd bought back on Earth, water-resistant and battery-powered, meant for camping trips he'd never taken. He set it beside him and played music while he ate his sandwich, just instrumental stuff, mostly. A cello player named Rodriguez that his wife used to love. Used to. Past tense. Because Linda was gone now, had been for 3 years, and that was why Tyler had left Earth in the first place. But he still listened to her music sometimes. The palace night staff thought he was crazy. A few of them told him so directly. "You're going to get yourself killed," said Myra, one of the other human janitors. "That's a dragon in there. An actual, ancient, powerful dragon. And she's grieving." "I know," Tyler said, wringing out his mop. "Grief makes people dangerous. And she's not even people, she's something way beyond us." Still just sitting outside, Tyler pointed out. Not bothering anyone. But Myra wasn't the only one worried. Even some of the alien staff members approached him, creatures from worlds he couldn't pronounce. They warned him in broken English or through translation devices that the Empress was unstable, that the power radiating from that room could crush his mind, that he was playing with forces he couldn't understand. Tyler listened politely and kept doing what he was doing. On the 7th night, something changed. Tyler was halfway through his dinner, leftover rice and chicken he'd made in his tiny apartment kitchen, when a voice spoke from behind the sealed doors. It was like thunder rolling across distant mountains, deep and vast and ancient. But also tired. So incredibly tired. "Why do you persist in coming here, small one?" Tyler's hand froze halfway to his mouth. His heart hammered in his chest. For a moment, he considered running. Every survival instinct screaming that he was way out of his depth. But he'd been asked a direct question. And his mother had raised him to be polite. He finished chewing, swallowed, then said, "My cleaning route takes me past here anyway, Your Majesty." Seemed like a good spot for a break. "It's quiet." Silence. Tyler wondered if he'd said the wrong thing. If he should apologize. If he should. "You do not fear me." It wasn't a question, but Tyler answered anyway. "Oh, I'm terrified," he admitted, setting down his food container. "But you're dealing with something a lot worse than anything I could imagine." Seemed rude to make it worse by running away screaming. Another pause. Then, "My mate is dead." The words carried weight that Tyler felt in his chest. Not metaphorically, he actually felt it, like pressure pushing against his ribs. This was grief on a scale he couldn't comprehend. 3,000 years of partnership, ended. An immortal being learning what it meant to lose everything. "I'm sorry," Tyler said quietly. And then, because sitting in silence felt wrong, "My wife died 3 years ago. Linda. We only had 12 years together, not thousands, but..." He trailed off, searching for words. Time doesn't really measure that kind of loss, does it? A day or a century, gone is still gone. The palace trembled. Just slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling in tiny streams. Tyler tensed, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. But when the voice came again, it was quieter. Smaller. Almost fragile. How do you endure it? Tyler leaned his head back against the wall, staring up at the crystal ceiling. How did he endure it? That was the question, wasn't it? The one he'd been avoiding for 3 years. Badly, he said finally. I left my whole planet behind because everything there reminded me of her. Every street corner, every restaurant, every song on the radio. I took a job literally light years away because I couldn't handle being in the same place where we used to be happy. He picked at his food container. I work night shifts so I don't have to talk to people. Don't have to pretend I'm okay when I'm not. I eat alone. I listen to sad music. Sometimes I talk to her even though she's not there to hear me. That is surviving, the Empress said. Not enduring. Yeah, maybe. Tyler considered that. But I keep moving forward. Even when it's hard. Even when I don't want to. Because stopping means drowning, and I think Linda wouldn't want me to drown. She'd want me to keep going, even if going meant being sad for a while. The presence behind the door shifted. Tyler could feel it, the way you can feel someone looking at you even when you can't see them. Your mate. Linda. What was she like? And so Tyler talked. He told stories about a woman the Empress would never meet. About how Linda couldn't cook to save her life but insisted on trying every Sunday. About her terrible jokes that made him groan but also laugh. About the way she hummed off-key while reading, completely unaware she was doing it. About how she'd gotten sick, how they'd fought it together for 2 years before it won. He talked for almost an hour. The Empress listened without interrupting. When he finally ran out of words, the silence that followed felt different. Not empty, but full. Shared. Thank you, the Empress said quietly. For speaking of her. For treating your grief as something real. Worthy of words. It is real, Tyler said. Just because I'm human and we don't live very long doesn't mean it hurts less when we lose someone. No, the Empress agreed. It does not. Tyler checked his watch. His break had gone 40 minutes over. He'd have to rush to finish his route. But he found he didn't care much. I should get back to work, he said, standing up and brushing off his uniform. But I'll be here tomorrow night. Same time. If you want to talk more. I would, the voice said. I would like that very much. Tyler picked up his cleaning cart and headed down the corridor. Behind him, the throne room fell quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet now. The kind that came after a storm had passed, when the air felt clean and new. And inside, Caldraxis sat in her massive chamber and realized something. For the first time in 43 cycles, she'd gone nearly 2 hours without the crushing weight of grief being the only thing she could feel. It was still there. It would always be there. But for 2 hours, she'd felt something else alongside it. She'd felt less alone. Word spread through the palace like wildfire. The human janitor was talking to the Empress. Actually talking to her, through those sealed doors that nobody else dared approach. Some thought it was the bravest thing they'd ever heard. Others thought Tyler had lost his mind. The palace's head administrator, a tall crystalline being named Thesserin, didn't care which it was. He only cared about protocol, order, and the fact that a low-level maintenance worker was interfering with matters far above his station. On the 10th night, Thesserin cornered Tyler in the supply room. You need to stop, Thesserin said, his crystalline body refracting light in sharp, aggressive patterns. Your behavior is inappropriate and potentially dangerous. Tyler continued loading cleaning supplies onto his cart. I'm just doing my job, sir. Your job does not include counseling the Empress of 17 star systems. I'm not counseling anyone. I'm just sitting there. Thesserin's facets flashed with irritation. You are a human. You have been part of the galactic community for barely 3 years. You know nothing of our ways, nothing of Dragonlord customs, nothing of the delicate political situation your actions are creating. Tyler stopped loading his cart and turned to face the administrator. With respect, sir, I don't think the Empress cares much about politics right now. She lost someone she loved. That's not a political situation. That's just pain. You presume to understand her needs. No, Tyler said simply. But I understand grief. And I know that sometimes the worst thing you can do to someone who's grieving is leave them completely alone because you're too scared or too proud or too worried about politics to just sit with them. She could destroy you with a thought. Maybe. But she won't. Tyler picked up a bottle of cleaning solution. Because despite everything, despite her power and her age and her position, Right now she's just someone who lost the person they loved most. And that person, that part of her, wouldn't hurt someone who's trying to help. Thesrin stared at him for a long moment. You are either remarkably wise or remarkably foolish. Probably the second one, Tyler admitted. But I'm going anyway. That night, when Tyler settled into his usual spot beside the throne room doors, something was different. He could feel it in the air, a shift in that ever-present pressure. He unpacked his dinner as always, a sandwich and an apple tonight, and started his music player. Then the doors opened. The sound was like mountains moving. Those massive metal doors, sealed for 50 cycles now, swung inward on silent hinges. Light spilled out from the throne room beyond, soft and blue-white, like moonlight on snow. Tyler's breath caught in his throat. His hands started shaking. This was it. He'd either made a terrible mistake or something incredible was about to happen. Enter, a voice called from within. That same thunderroll voice, but clearer now. Not muffled by doors and walls. Tyler stood on legs that felt like water. He left his cleaning cart behind and walked through those doors into a space that made him feel impossibly small. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above. The walls were carved crystal that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And at the center, on a throne carved from a single massive diamond, sat the Empress. Caldraxis was in her half-form, the shape she took when she wanted to be both regal and approachable. She was easily 15 feet tall, with scales of deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light. Her eyes glowed like molten gold, ancient and knowing and infinitely sad. Wings, folded against her back, stretched into the shadows. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Tyler had ever seen. You are smaller than I imagined, Caldraxis said, and there might have been the tiniest hint of amusement in her voice. Yeah, we humans tend to be, Tyler managed to say. His voice only shook a little. She gestured with one clawed hand to the space beside her throne. Sit with me. Please. Tyler walked across that vast floor, his footsteps echoing like drumbeats. When he reached the throne, he looked up at the Empress, then at the ornate space beside her seat, then back at her. I'm going to sit on the floor, if that's okay, he said. That chair looks expensive and I'm probably going to spill something. For the first time in 50 cycles, Caldraxis laughed. It was a rusty sound, like an engine that hadn't been used in years, but it was genuine. As you wish. Tyler sat down cross-legged at the base of her throne, his back against the diamond, and unpacked his dinner. He offered her half his sandwich, just like he would with any friend. She stared at it, then at him, and that rusty laugh came again. I do not eat such things, small one. Your loss. It's turkey and cheese. They sat in silence for a moment. Tyler ate his sandwich. The Empress watched him with those ancient golden eyes. Then she began to speak. The words poured out like a dam breaking. 3,000 years of memories. She told him about Vethrian, how they'd met during the Unification Wars, how he'd been fierce and gentle at the same time, how his laugh could literally shake mountains. She spoke about the life they'd built together, the empire they'd created, the millions of lives they'd touched. She told him about the last transmission she'd received. Vethrian's voice, calm and steady, saying he loved her as he held off the Void Reapers. Saying he was sorry. Saying goodbye. Tyler listened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer empty platitudes like his in a better place, or time heals all wounds. He just listened, because sometimes that's all anyone needs. When she finally fell silent, her massive frame shaking with barely contained emotion, Tyler spoke. Linda loved terrible movies, he said quietly. The worse they were, the more she enjoyed them. She'd make popcorn and would watch these awful sci-fi films from the 80s and she'd laugh at every bad special effect. He smiled at the memory. After she died, I couldn't watch movies at all for almost a year. Even good ones. Because she wasn't there to laugh with me. How did you begin again? Caldraxis asked. I didn't, really. Not the same way. But eventually I started doing other things. Different things. Not replacing her or forgetting her, just making new memories that didn't hurt quite so much. He looked up at the Empress. The pain doesn't go away. You just get stronger at carrying it. Caldraxis was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, her massive form began to shift and shimmer. She transformed into something more human-sized, still clearly not human, with her blue-black skin and golden eyes and the faint impression of scales, but closer. She stepped down from her throne and sat on the floor beside Tyler. Thank you, she said, and her voice was softer now, more vulnerable. For sitting with me. For sharing your pain. For treating mine as if it mattered. It does matter, Tyler said. Just because you're an ancient dragon empress doesn't mean your grief is any less real than mine was. They sat together as the planet's sun began to rise, painting the crystal walls in shades of amber and gold. Two beings from completely different worlds, sharing the universal language of loss. Will you come back tomorrow? Caldraxis asked. Tyler nodded. Same time, Your Majesty. Caldraxis, she said. When we are alone like this, you may call me Caldraxis. Then you can call me Tyler. As Tyler walked back through those massive doors to finish his cleaning shift, he felt lighter somehow. Behind him, Caldraxis sat in her throne room, no longer sealed, and watched the sunrise for the first time in 50 cycles. The worst of the storm had passed. She was still grieving. Still broken in ways that might never fully heal. But she wasn't drowning anymore. And sometimes, that was enough. The news traveled across 17 star systems faster than lightspeed communications. The Empress had emerged. After 50 cycles of isolation, Caldraxis the Eternal had opened her throne room doors and resumed her duties. But she was different now. The generals and advisors who met with her noticed it immediately. She still possessed that ancient power, that presence that made even the bravest warriors feel small. But there was something new in her eyes, a depth that hadn't been there before. She listened more carefully. Her decisions carried a weight they hadn't had in centuries. When a border dispute arose between two colony worlds, she didn't simply impose a solution from on high. She asked questions. She wanted to understand the people involved, their fears, their losses. She ruled with strength, yes, but also with something that looked almost like compassion. And every night, without fail, a human janitor sat with her in the throne room. Tyler's routine became known throughout the palace. Staff members would see him pushing his cleaning cart through the corridors, and they'd nod with respect now instead of pity or confusion. He'd finish his regular duties, then spend his break sitting beside the Empress, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. The palace staff no longer feared the pressure radiating from the throne room. Instead, they noticed how the Empress's shoulders would relax when Tyler arrived, how the dangerous energy that had built up during those dark 50 cycles had transformed into something more like peace. But not everyone was happy about it. In the military quarters, in private chambers far from the throne room, a group of high-ranking officers held secret meetings. At their center was Commander Draven, a warrior from one of the Empire's most aggressive species. He'd served for 200 years, fought in a dozen wars, and believed firmly in the old ways. She's compromised, Draven said, his voice low and intense. The Dragon Lords built this empire on strength, on absolute power. Now our Empress sits with a human, a janitor, and weeps about her feelings. General Cora, a tactical genius from the Ice Worlds, nodded slowly. The other systems are watching. If they see weakness, they might challenge our authority. It's not just weakness, another officer added. It's this new policy direction. Mental health services for soldiers? Grief counseling? These are warrior cultures we're dealing with. They respect strength, not sentiment. Draven leaned forward. I propose we issue a formal challenge. Not to overthrow her, I'm not suggesting treason. But to test her. If she's still fit to rule, she'll prove it. If not. He left the sentence hanging. Tyler knew nothing about these meetings. He was just a janitor, after all, invisible to the political machinery of an interstellar empire. But he noticed things. He noticed how certain officers stopped talking when he walked past. He noticed the way some of the military staff looked at him now, not with curiosity or respect, but with something colder. On his break one night, sitting in the throne room with Caldraxis, he mentioned it. I think some of your people aren't happy about this, he said, gesturing vaguely between them. The whole, us talking thing. Caldraxis, in her more human-sized form, sat across from him on the floor. They'd been playing a simple card game Tyler had taught her, something called Go Fish that Linda used to love. I know, she said, laying down a pair of cards. Commander Draven and his faction have been quite vocal in certain circles. You know about that. I am an ancient dragon, Tyler. I have sources of information you cannot imagine. She smiled slightly. Also, Thesserin reports everything to me. He's actually quite fond of you now, though he'd never admit it. Tyler shuffled the cards nervously. Are you worried? About Draven, I mean. Caldraxis was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes distant. Do you know what I learned during those 50 cycles I spent alone in this room? What? That rage is easy. Rage is simple. When Vethrian died, I could have leveled cities with my grief. I could have transformed it into anger and lashed out at the universe for taking him from me. She picked up a card, studied it. But rage would have been a shield. A way to avoid feeling the actual pain underneath. So what did you do instead? I sat with the pain. I let it exist without trying to destroy it or run from it. And you, she looked at him directly, you showed me that doing so wasn't weakness. It was perhaps the hardest thing I've ever done. Tyler nodded slowly. Linda used to say that anyone can throw a punch when they're angry. It takes real strength to cry when you need to. Your Linda was wise. Caldraxis set down her cards. Draven thinks my grief has made me soft. He's wrong. It's made me understand something I'd forgotten in 3,000 years of rule. What's that? That everyone in this empire, every soldier, every farmer, every merchant, they all carry their own grief. Their own losses. And ruling them means understanding that, not just commanding them. She stood, her form beginning to shift and grow. Draven wants to test my strength. Tomorrow, I'll give him that opportunity. The next morning, the throne room was packed. Word had spread that Commander Draven was making a formal challenge. Not for the throne itself, that would be treason, but for the Empress to prove she was still fit to rule. Tyler watched from the gallery above, technically off duty but unable to stay away. He tried to talk Caldraxis out of this, but she just smiled and told him not to worry. Draven stood in the center of the massive room, his armor gleaming, his stance aggressive. Empress Caldraxis, he declared, his voice carrying to every corner. You have shown weakness. You have allowed grief to cloud your judgment. You sit with humans and speak of feelings while the Empire needs strength. Caldraxis descended from her throne, and Tyler felt the temperature in the room drop. She was in her full dragon form now, massive, ancient, terrifying. Her scales seemed to absorb the light around her. You believe grief is weakness, Commander? Her voice shook the walls. I believe a ruler cannot afford such indulgences. Then let me educate you. Caldraxis's eyes blazed. I loved Vethrian for 3,000 years. When he died, I could have let that grief consume me. I could have burned worlds in my rage. Instead, I chose to face it. To acknowledge it. To sit with my pain until I understood it. She moved closer to Draven, her massive form towering over him. Do you know what that required? Not less strength, Commander. More. More strength than I've needed in 1,000 years of warfare. Words, Draven spat. Show me strength, not philosophy. Very well. Caldraxis's voice went cold. I challenge you. Single combat. If you can survive 3 minutes against a dragon lord who has learned she has nothing left to fear, you may question my fitness to rule. The room went silent. Tyler's hands gripped the gallery railing. Draven hesitated, just for a second, but he couldn't back down. I accept. What happened next lasted exactly 93 seconds. Caldraxis didn't toy with him. Didn't humiliate him. She simply demonstrated, with precise and overwhelming force, exactly what 3,000 years of experience combined with grief-forged resolve looked like. Draven was a skilled warrior, one of the best in the Empire. Against the Empress, he never stood a chance. When it was over, Draven knelt on the floor, his armor scorched but intact, his pride thoroughly crushed. Caldraxis returned to her smaller form. You mistook vulnerability for fragility, Commander. You assumed that because I allowed myself to grieve, I had become weak. She addressed the entire room now. Let this be a lesson. Strength without wisdom is just violence. Power without understanding is just tyranny. I have ruled you for 1,000 years, and I will continue to do so, but I will do it with the full range of what it means to be alive. Including grief. Including joy. Including all the messy, complicated emotions that come with caring about something beyond mere conquest. She looked up at the gallery, caught Tyler's eye, and smiled slightly. This empire will be stronger for it. Or those who disagree are welcome to challenge me themselves. No one did. That night, Tyler found Caldraxis sitting on the floor of her throne room, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked. I proved my strength today, she said quietly. But I wish Vethrian had been here to see it. Tyler sat down beside her. Yeah. I get that. They sat together in silence, two friends sharing the bittersweet victory of moving forward while carrying the weight of those who couldn't come with them. 6 months passed like water flowing downstream, steady, inevitable, changing everything it touched. The Empire settled into a new rhythm under Caldraxis's continued rule, but the changes were undeniable. She'd established grief support programs for military families who'd lost loved ones in service. She created mental health resources for veterans struggling with trauma. She even instituted mandatory rest periods for soldiers on active duty, something that had never existed before. The other species in the empire were skeptical at first. These were warrior cultures, after all, societies built on strength and honor and never showing weakness. But slowly, quietly, things began to shift. A decorated general admitted he'd been struggling since losing his entire unit. A pilot spoke openly about the nightmares that followed a particularly brutal battle. And because the Empress herself had shown that vulnerability wasn't the same as weakness, others felt safe enough to do the same. Tyler watched these changes from his usual position, quietly, from the margins, while mopping floors and emptying trash bins. He'd turned down 3 promotions in those 6 months. Caldraxis had offered him a position as a cultural liaison. Thesserin had suggested he might make an excellent diplomatic advisor. Even some of the human embassy staff had approached him about a cushy government job. He'd said no to all of them. "I like my job," he'd explained to Caldraxis one night. "I like the night shift. I like the quiet. I like that I can just be myself without all the politics and expectations." She'd understood. That was the thing about their friendship, it was built on understanding, not grand gestures or obligations. They still met most nights. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, Tyler reading a book while Caldraxis worked on diplomatic documents. It wasn't fancy or formal. It was just 2 people who'd found something valuable in each other's company. One evening, as winter settled over the capital city and snow drifted past the massive windows of the throne room, Caldraxis asked Tyler a question she'd been wondering about for months. "Why did you really sit beside my door that first night?" Tyler looked up from the sandwich he was eating. They were sitting on the floor again, as had become their habit. Caldraxis was in her humanoid form, wearing simpler clothes now instead of the elaborate royal garments she used to favor. "Honestly?" Tyler set down his food. "I saw someone in pain, sitting alone in the dark. And it reminded me of myself 3 years ago, right after Linda died." "Tell me," Caldraxis said gently. Tyler was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "After the funeral, after all our friends and family went home, I spent about 4 months barely leaving the house. I'd go to work, come home, sit in the dark, and just exist. I wasn't living. I was just breathing and waiting for the next day to be over." "What changed?" "My neighbor, Mr. Patterson. Old guy, must have been in his 70s. One day he just showed up on my porch with 2 cups of coffee. Didn't ask if he could come in. Didn't try to tell me everything would be okay. He just sat down in the chair next to me and drank his coffee while I sat there with all my grief." Tyler smiled at the memory. "He did that every Saturday morning for 3 months. We barely talked. He'd just sit there, drink his coffee, read his newspaper, and then leave. But knowing someone was there, someone who didn't need me to be okay or put together or anything except exactly what I was, that helped more than anything else anyone did." "So you were paying it forward," Caldraxis said. "Something like that. Plus, I figured someone like you, an empress, a dragon lord, someone who's lived for thousands of years, you probably have a million people wanting things from you all the time. Advisors telling you what to do, generals asking for orders, diplomats needing decisions. I thought maybe you could use someone who didn't want anything except to make sure you weren't alone." Caldraxis was quiet for a long moment, her golden eyes distant. "Do you know what you gave me, Tyler?" "What?" "Permission to be broken without shame." She looked at him directly. "In my culture, in my position, vulnerability has always been unthinkable. Dragonlords don't grieve openly. Empresses don't cry. We endure, we conquer, we rule, but we don't break." "But you did break," Tyler said softly. "I did. And you, a human who's lived barely 3 decades compared to my 3 millennia, you taught me that breaking isn't the same as being destroyed. You showed me that acknowledging pain is harder than hiding behind rage or power." She smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it. "You taught someone who's existed for ages how to simply be real." "Well," Tyler said with a slight grin, "being real is pretty much my only skill. I'm not great at much else." Caldraxis laughed, that sound that had been rusty and broken 6 months ago but now came easily and often. "You're better at it than most beings I've encountered in 3,000 years." They sat together as snow continued to fall outside, 2 unlikely friends from impossibly different worlds who'd found common ground in the universal language of loss and healing. A week later, Tyler got a message on his personal communicator. It was from Earth, his sister Amy, who he hadn't spoken to in almost a year. "Hey little brother," the video message said. Amy looked older than he remembered, tired but smiling. "I heard about what you did. About the Empress and everything. It's all over the news here. They're calling you the human who befriended a dragon, and making you sound like some kind of hero." Tyler groaned. Of course the media had gotten hold of the story. Amy continued, "But I wanted to tell you something else. After I saw the news, I started going to that grief support group I told you about. The one for people who've lost spouses. I've been avoiding it for 2 years, since David died, because I thought going meant admitting I couldn't handle it on my own." She wiped her eyes. "But if you can sit with an ancient alien empress while she grieves, I figure I can sit in a church basement with some neighbors. So, thanks. For showing me it's okay to not be okay." Tyler watched the message 3 times, then sent a simple reply, "Proud of you, sis. Let's talk soon." That night, he told Caldraxis about it. "Your actions ripple outward," she said. "Like dropping a stone in still water. You sat with me. Your sister saw that and found her own courage. How many others have been inspired by her story? And by hers, how many more?" "I didn't do anything special," Tyler protested. "I just sat there. You were present. You were honest. You were kind." Caldraxis stood, moving to the massive windows overlooking the city. "That is special, Tyler. More than you know." Across the Empire, the story had indeed spread. Not the political version about challenges and demonstrations of power, but the simpler, more human story, an empress and a janitor, grief shared, healing found in unexpected friendship. On distant colony worlds, beings began to reconsider what strength really meant. In military academies, instructors started teaching that a good leader acknowledges pain rather than hiding it. In homes across 17 star systems, people had conversations they'd been avoiding, admitting hurts they'd been carrying alone. All because one human janitor had seen someone crying behind a door and decided to sit down beside them. Tyler never saw himself as a hero. He went to work each night, cleaned his assigned areas, and spent his breaks with a friend who happened to rule star systems. It was simple. It was quiet. It was real. And sometimes, the realest things are the ones that change everything. Years later, when historians wrote about this period in the Empire's history, they'd struggle to explain exactly what had shifted. The policies would be documented, the reforms noted, the political changes analyzed. But the heart of it, that moment when an immortal dragon empress and a grieving human janitor sat together in the dark and reminded each other that pain shared is pain survived, that would remain something beyond politics or analysis. It would remain simply, powerfully human. Even when one of the humans involved had scales and could breathe fire. On Tyler's last night before his contract ended and he returned to Earth, Caldraxis gave him a gift. It was a small crystal, no bigger than his thumb, that swirled with colors that didn't exist in nature. "A dragon tear," she explained. "From that first night, when you cleaned them from my floor. I kept one." "I can't accept this," Tyler said, awed. "It's too valuable." "It's a reminder," Caldraxis said firmly, "that even broken things can be beautiful. That tears shed aren't weakness but proof that we loved deeply enough to grieve." Tyler held the crystal carefully. "I'm going to miss our talks." "As will I, my friend." She smiled. "But you've taught me well. I know now that moving forward doesn't mean leaving grief behind. It means carrying it with grace." They embraced, an ancient dragon empress and a simple janitor, and the friendship between them shone brighter than all the stars in 17 systems.